All right, this is my reply to Nuker, otherwise known as Steve in real life, and his commentary about the upcoming Serra St. Pierre fight in Montreal on April 19th. Now, I've listened to a couple of Steve's commentaries on MMA, and for the most part, I find them well presented from a technical standpoint, and typically the arguments are logical. Whether I agree with them or not, I can at least understand where he comes from with them. Unfortunately, I can't in this case. I think Steve's dropped the ball on this one. I think he's let a bias overtake his observations and kind of give himself a little bit of less credibility because of it. Now, again, this is not a personal attack. It's just against the arguments that he's made in this commentary. I think Steve fails to make his argument for a couple of reasons. Firstly, he makes a couple of statements that I find to be, a bit outlandish, and because of their outlandish nature, because of their sort of overblown rhetoric, I think they demand some sort of support, or at least a reference to something that makes someone go like, okay, yeah, I could see that. But he doesn't do that. And he also contradicts himself a couple of times, and he ends up undermining his own statements, usually and often fairly quickly. Also not bashing Serra with this. I happen to like Serra. I think he's a good fighter. He's an excellent jiu-jitsu practitioner. His takedowns are pretty good. He's a competent striker, and he's got some heavy hands. He's not a one knockout punch kind of guy, but he's got some heavy hands. He's not a top-level striker, though. Now, what I find funny about the fact that Steve actually says that, of course, Serra has knockout power and GSP doesn't. Well, the accumulation of blow theory is how he does it. According to him, GSP's TKOs have all come as a result of accumulation of strikes. Well, the one TKO that Serra has, which is against GSP, a deserved TKO to be sure, but still it's only one, came as the result of accumulation of blows. I mean, during that last 40 seconds of the fight, Serra lands like throws a whole bunch, but lands like 25 or 30 punches before the fight stopped. That's an accumulation of blows. That's not a one-punch knockout. That's not huge knockout power. That's an accumulation of blows. What I find funny is the double standard. I mean, Steve says that, okay, Serra does it with an accumulation of blows. That means he has knockout power, but GSP does it by an accumulation of blows, and that means he doesn't have knockout power. I think you really got to examine where you're coming from with this whole lack of power and power for one versus the other. I think that needs a lot of explanation. Next we come to the statement where GSP is weak in the mental aspect of fighting. Now, I don't know where this comes from. I really don't. I would love to find out why Steve thinks that GSP is weak mentally in the aspect of fighting. I mean, you've never seen the guy wilt during the course of a fight or give up. I mean, he's had 2 losses, granted, which doesn't mean anything. Anybody can lose in this game. One is the result of a deep armbar, which, wow, that was a deep armbar. And the other was a TKO by Serra, a deserved one, because he was not intelligently defending himself. Now, those are 2 losses that he couldn't do anything about. And more importantly, in the fights immediately following those 2 losses, St. Pierre comes back stronger than he ever has, defeating Hughes in their first round and completely out-wrestling Koscheck in that fight after the Serra loss. So how he's weak, I would really like to know. And then we come to a bevy of statements on behalf of Steve. And I'm just going to quote them here for you. The weakness of GSP is that he is inconsistent. He is not very good at anything. He catches people off guard because he does things people don't expect. He wrestles with wrestlers. His striking is decent. He fights with such awkward type of complete style. He is able to beat fighters at their own strength. He is a top 5 fighter. Now, leaving aside the contradiction of being not very good at anything and a top 5 fighter, the whole thing about he catches people off guard, I don't think he catches them off guard by his tactic. In fact, if you look at his fights, it seems to be his primary method of coming up with strategies to fight his opponents. He will take you at his strength. That isn't an indication of a lack of ability. That's an indication of a great ability. I mean, Koscheck was fully aware that GSP liked to out-wrestle wrestlers. I mean, all he had to do was watch any of the 2 Hughes fights that were available at that time, along with the Trigg fight or the Shirk fight, or look at the fight with St. Pierre and Caro, or St. Pierre and BJ. I mean, these guys are all guys that can handle themselves on the ground, and St. Pierre got the better of them. Or at least, in the case of Caro, probably fought him equally on the ground, but beat him on the stand-up. But I mean, there's enough history there to show that GSP takes them at their strength. To say Koscheck was surprised by it, it just doesn't match. I mean, Koscheck himself in the pre-fight interviews mentioned it several times. Now, granted, I'll give you Koscheck was surprised, but he was surprised by GSP's ability to do just that, to take him down. He didn't think he could do it, but he did it. It's not that he was going to do it, he just thought he'd be able to stuff him because he's that good. Turned out he wasn't. Now, the next thing that just got me, and because there was no explanation for it, was that the fight cards are playing in GSP's favor. I mean, of the two fighters that are going to meet on April 19th, I think that statement's far more applicable to Serra than it is to St. Pierre. And that's not to slam Serra for it, because Serra's a good fighter, and he beat the guys he had to when he had to beat them. You know, he's lost to a few guys that St. Pierre beat, but, I mean, he's done what he did, and he's made the most of his opportunities. But when you compare the cards of the two of them, I mean, it's not even close. I mean, you know, St. Pierre's got two wins over Hughes, Koscheck. He's got a win over Penn, Shirk, Trigg, Miller, Haran, Parisian, Serra, plus a bunch of other guys that, you know, don't really worth mention. You look at the win list for Serra, and outside of GSP, I mean, you got Lewis, Telvey, Malisi, Dulanti, Karan, Menjivar, Lytle. I mean, of the two cards, I'd say Serra's favored him more so than GSP was favored by them. I mean, one route was significantly, I think, harder than the other. But I'd like to know where you come up with the idea that St. Pierre was favored by it. I'd really like to hear your reasoning behind that. Beyond that, I mean, you make another couple of statements, which I will say you could actually make a case for. At least I could understand a case being made for them. I may not agree or disagree with them, but you know, I could understand it. And it's not that I'm disagreeing with you necessarily, but although I do, I would actually like to hear why you think these ways. For example, you say Serra's mentally stronger. I disagree. I think both of them are mentally strong. I think through the course of their careers, both of them have responded well to pressure. I think they've both shown aggressiveness at all times. I don't think any of them have wilted. I don't think any of them have folded. I don't think any of them have crumbled. I think they both have done a good job mentally. Equally, you say Serra has no pressure in this fight, and I'd like to hear why, but I think he has pressure as well as St. Pierre. I think both of them are suffering for some pressure on this one. You know, Serra obviously to retain his belt, and, you know, because he doesn't want to give it up. There's no way he wants to give it up. And I mean, that's some pressure, even if it's just on himself. Him putting it on himself, I mean. And St. Pierre, I mean, he doesn't want to lose again. He wants to win. And I mean, that's pressure too. And I think internal pressure is always a hell of a lot more important than external pressures. But again, I mean, that's subject to debate, and I'd like to hear what you have to say on those two topics. Now, then you get onto this avenging losses. People who've done it are in a minority. Now, I haven't done a great in-depth statistical analysis on this. I'd wager you haven't either. But I don't think you really have to look at the body of fighters that have ever been in MMA to determine that. I think you have to look at the individual fighters themselves. I think both Serra and St. Pierre, on each having one occasion to redeem themselves from a previous loss, both managed to avenge those losses. Serra by beating Shoney Carter, and of course St. Pierre by defeating Matt Hughes. Now, I know you can go beyond that and look at other fighters, but I think you can come up with enough instances of people avenging their losses to not take that statement as an absolute. I mean, you've got Liddell beating Couture and Horn, you've got Diego Sanchez losing to Koscheck. You've got Spencer Fisher beating Sam Stout, BJ Penn beating Pulver, Dan Severn beating Ken Shamrock, Nick Diaz beating Jeremy Jackson, and so on. I mean, there's enough. But I would like to... I don't think that's a valid consideration. In conclusion, I mean, Steve, you've got some strong opinions, and I know you hold them strongly and you believe in them, but I don't think overall that your opinion has some credibility, because it appears that you're biased against GSP for some reason. I could be wrong on that. There could be something else going on, and I mean, feel free to explain it if so. But I think if you can address the things that I brought up, I think we could have an interesting discussion about this. Anyway, looking forward to hearing your response if you're so inclined. And just to let you know, my prediction: St. Pierre will probably win in the late in the third round, probably by submission. That's my prediction.